$4.4 million pay program that's going into effect in October. That's very meaningful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I recognize that we have a way to go, but our people are important. They're a priority. We're nothing without the over 600 employees that work for us, whether it be the ones at the surface water treatment plant or the police officers, firefighters, the folks that pick up the garbage, or even y'all, right? I mean, we would be doing nothing if it weren't for our people.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Town Talk. Today, we're talking about the budget. It's a big story, right? A big topic in our city's local government. And who better to have here than to talk about just that story than our city manager, Jesus Garza. I feel like I need to bring the hype button back. And I don't have it in front of me.
I feel like you do, actually.
Right? That was really a pretty good drum roll.
That was good. Thank you.
Well, welcome.
There it is.
Oh, that's not a hype. That's the GOAT. Don't tell Sam. So welcome back.
Thank you.
How have you been?
Great. Can't complain.
Since we last talked, I don't even remember when that was.
I mean, I guess I could complain, but
we all could. But life is good, looking at the bright side of things. Speaking of the bright side of things, we're here to talk today about the budget, and there's so many good things coming out of it. But, you and I were just kind of chit-chatting before we got started today, and one of which was how, it's good to be grateful, but it's also good to keep a bigger picture and perspective on things happening in local government. And so one of the things that you're really good at doing, and I'm trying to learn along the way, is what are other cities doing? What are they going through, right? We kind of went through some stuff, but, what are other cities having to face right now? And how is their budget looking knowing that? So anyway, I thought we'd kick it off with that, just to bring the big picture into things.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think it highlights how different we are in comparison to some of these communities.
Yeah.
I know that it's probably not common, for residents to keep up with what's going on in other communities, but obviously in my world we do.
Right.
And there's definitely consistent trends going on across the entire state that are impacting us to some extent, but not to the same level of severity as other places. And so as an example, the housing market is stabilizing and basically slowly but surely becoming a buyer's market. And so what that does is that it has slowed down the increase in appraised values,
right?
Not only in Victoria, but across the entire state. And so what this does in most cities is that it creates deficit situations for these cities. And so we're beginning to see in other communities where they're having to face major cuts or reductions because they're not anticipating as much new revenue next year as much as they had the previous years. And so when you're reliant on property values growing every year, ever so much, and then that doesn't happen, then it puts you in a position to have to cut back.
Yeah.
And we're in a completely different situation because we always budget very conservatively. I suppose one of the pros of our lack of growth is that we're not dependent on new growth to fund our daily operation like other cities are. And so we are seeing that in the budget that council has approved.
Right. And I've obviously been reading and hearing whispers of different, state laws going into effect after the legislature just concluded. That could have been impacting cities too. So there's a lot of discussion around that. But even just seeing the headlines of different cities, I'm not going to go into detail, but sorry to say it, but I saw Corpus Christi's going through some stuff, San Antonio. And so, I know that you said we're different. Can you speak a little bit toward how we are different?
I was actually having a conversation with the mayor and a couple council members about this last week. And I think one thing that makes us different as well is that we don't have as much geopolitics as other communities. And other communities that have districts, there's a lot of geopolitics that takes place.
Like Houston.
In order for initiatives to be funded in particular areas of town. And so we're very blessed that our entire council, even though they represent districts, they actually take a holistic approach to their policy making process. They're always looking at what's in the best interest of the entire city, as an example. And so what also helps create a more stable environment for us here is that, right? They're on the same page. They're in sync.
Right.
We have a unified vision that they've laid out several years ago that we're continuing to tap into or to try and achieve. And so all of that helps. Unfortunately, in other communities, you have geopolitics or you have the introduction of new elected officials that might try and stir the pot, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And in our particular case, we have a very stable, very experienced council.
For sure.
So that consistency is key in ensuring that we are stable, not from a political standpoint as well. I talked a little bit about the financial stabilization aspect of it, which we do by budgeting conservatively every year. But politically speaking, we're also very stable because council is a unified council that takes the big picture in mind. And other communities have to deal with both of those issues. They have to deal with the geopolitics as well as very aggressive budgeting practices that when the economy doesn't keep up, puts them in positions to have to cut things.
Right. And then you see it in the headlines.
Right.
So here we are. We're Victoria. Let's talk a little bit about what the story is behind our budget this year. Again, I was telling you earlier, one of the biggest things that we kept hearing as city staff, but even in the community is, let's get better pay for our first responders, PD and fire. And let's talk about that because that's exactly what we've been doing. Little did many people know for actually the past 5 years and working towards that. And then even more significantly this year, right? So anyway, just kick it off with what's in the budget.
Yeah, sure. So council just recently adopted a $255 million budget, and that includes a $67 million general fund, which is where we fund police and fire.
Right.
And every year we have priorities, right? And this year, and going into fiscal year 26, which starts on October 1st, public safety was on top of the list, not only from a compensation standpoint, but also through equipment and apparatuses and other things that they need. And so that's definitely a big part of the budget story going into fiscal year 26 that we recommended and council approved a roughly $4.3 million pay program, where over 70% of that is going to first responders. This is a very historic pay program. That's the way that I've been describing it to council.
Yep. Because
there literally has not been any other year in the history of the city that we've been able to implement a $4 million pay program literally overnight.
Right.
And beginning October 1st, that $4.4 million program is going into effect, right? And like I said, a lot of that is going towards police and fire. This is not a new thing for us to try and prioritize our employees, but it certainly was exacerbated recently because of a couple of things. One, sort of the post-pandemic world. We realized after the pandemic that we were falling further behind market with police and fire. So there was a lot of data that was suggesting that we needed to be more aggressive with pay in order to keep or attract more police officers or firefighters or paramedics. And so that was driving some of that. I think council policy direction drove some of that. It was very evident through just council policy and priority discussions that they wanted us to prioritize public safety. And so that's what we did. In the non-compensation part of it, we're acquiring 9 police vehicles, 4 ambulances, 3 pumpers, 1 brush truck for police and fire. And so that's also a significant investment because we typically are never in a position to acquire that many vehicles in one go.
Right.
And so we recognize that in order for us to be an employer of choice for police and fire, right, people need to have the tools and the resources that they need to be successful. And you may recall me talking in different retreats and whatnot that I'm a big fan of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I believe that, if we really want our employees to go above and beyond, represent us well, do the job the right way and everything that we expect, they really need to have these foundational core elements intact, right? And that's, of course, compensation, that's facilities, that's the vehicles and the tools that they have readily available. And so I'm hopeful that through the completion of the new public safety headquarter building, through an aggressive pay program and an aggressive plan to update the fleet for both police and fire, that we just become a more attractive place for them. And that's big. It's public safety is one of the main things that we provide as local government. And so we want to make sure that we do that in an effective manner.
Right.
And this budget tells that story with that investment.
Well, speaking of investment and employee compensation, we did prioritize public safety. There are other departments that were touched in that process, but even recently, I'm just going to keep coming back to it because we're still working toward solutions here. But the boil water notices, that kind of created more of an emphasis and kind of I would say, an eye-opener as to other important departments that are still in the city, right? That while all help funnel and facilitate a community to keep running, provide services to that community. And so have you guys talked about that? Have y'all done anything with Public Works, for example? I know y'all had mentioned it in council discussion.
Yes, that's been a big part of a conversation. And I left out earlier talking about the council subcommittee on compensation.
Mm-hmm.
After we went through the budget process last summer, the mayor appointed a few council members to serve on a committee.
Yep.
And so we've been looking at the compensation woes, since last fall.
So you have known about that since then.
With 3 council members. And,
Yeah.
and one thing to keep in mind too is that, in our particular case with our budget,
Mm-hmm.
not all money is created equal. And so we're blessed that we run our own utility.
Mm-hmm.
But the utility is funded through the ratepayers,
Right.
not the taxpayers. And in our world, those are 2 completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have our challenges as it relates to revenue on the property tax side.
Yep.
Because of our lack of growth. And I know we're going to get into that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But on the utility side, we also have an impact of that lack of growth. Because when our community is not growing in population, we're not increasing the number of customers.
Right.
When we're not increasing customers, we're not increasing revenue to do things like pay our utility employees more money.
Right.
And we also haven't increased utility rates since 2019. And so when you're not having new revenue come in, how are you going to pay for things like compensation, right?
Yeah.
And so when the original recommendation came out for the pay program, it did not include a very aggressive pay recommendation for utility-centric employees because that's a different revenue source.
Right.
That necessitates a different strategy on how to sustain that.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, after the boil water notices, it was very evident through our investigations that one of the contributing factors was just the vacancies that we have at the surface water treatment plant and within our utilities division. And so we did add last minute over $200,000 in a pay program recommendation for utility-centric employees as a way to start being more aggressive with pay for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so to your point, and you know this because I say it all the time, but every single city employee is equally important.
Yep.
I recognize that police and fire are more publicly recognized and visible.
Sure.
And they're talked about, right, by everybody, right? But as we learned through the boil water notices, right, I mean, we have other critical positions in this organization that directly contribute to our quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with a business owner recently, and he made it a very, I think, appropriate observation in that, we talk about police and fire all the time, but how often does somebody need a police officer? How often does somebody need a firefighter, right? Versus people need water every day.
Yeah.
And
their trash picked up every day.
Every day or every week.
Right.
And so when you think about those touch points and how often is a resident dependent on that water that they use every day, on that trash pickup that they receive weekly.
Yep.
And if we think about it from that perspective, it really starts to kind of change the narrative around, well, what departments are also important?
Yeah.
Or maybe more important because of just how often they touch the general public.
For sure.
And so we want to have good balance there, right? And so I think this budget, I think, achieves that. By no means do any of us believe that, this budget will be a silver bullet solution to our challenges in personnel, but we certainly think it'll help our cause.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's all we can do is to try and just be better.
Right.
And so it's something we've been trying to do for the last 6 years, and this budget continues that.
Yeah.
Just more aggressively.
Well, I appreciate you guys' leadership in that area because it is easy, right? Like if I'm a resident and I don't work as closely with you all and council as I get to, I might be naturally focused on the things that do impact me daily that I do not, or that maybe impact me and that I just tend to focus on, which might be streets. So let's segue into that, right?
Absolutely.
So coming again, and you've said it all the time, and I'm just echoing you at this point, which is streets are just one facet of operating a community. From a local government's perspective, when you go out of town, I love that you said this, you may not be going to see their streets. There's other things that you go to other towns for. And that, again, facilitates the growth of Victoria. So we got to think about everything. And that's what you and council do so well. But I thought it was a perfect opportunity because that's a starting point for a lot of residents here who's like, well, what about my street? And they may not see, on their commute that they might see this road being worked on, but maybe not that one on the exact opposite side of town. So this CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, for those who don't know, actually addresses all of that. And not only for this year, but forecasts for years to come. So can you talk about that?
Sure.
What's in this year's budget?
So we normally think about, we normally plan our CIP in advance. It's either a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. And right now we're on a 3-year cycle. And and it was important for us to try and be a little bit more narrow with that time frame, because back in 2021, at the beginning of fiscal year 22, we made a commitment. We made a commitment that from fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 26, we would address roughly 112 miles of streets. That was our commitment. The previous 5-year window addressed 75. And so we wanted to be very intentional with, hey, we know this is a priority for the public. We know it's a priority for council. Let's invest more money in streets so that we can just fix more streets. We have over 330 miles of streets in our community. And so it's impossible to address them all at once. And they all didn't get in their condition overnight either.
Right.
And so it's important to be realistic with our expectations around how we go about addressing our streets. And fiscal year 26 is the 5th year of that 5-year commitment. And so we are working as aggressive as we can to reach that 112 miles of streets by the end of the fiscal year. And I think that's a big story that sometimes goes untold.
Yeah.
Because I think we've, and maybe it's a good thing, but I think we've gotten into a new normal for us, which a new normal for us is addressing quite a bit of streets every year, right? And so it's not necessarily new news like it maybe was in 22 when we started to be aggressive with it.
Right.
And so as an example, in fiscal year 26, it's roughly, by the way, it's roughly a $79 million CIP, some of that driven by the community center project.
Sure.
But we have roughly $17 million going towards residential streets. We have $8 million going towards thoroughfare streets. And so, again, significant investment in streets.
Yep.
But to your point, sometimes they might be hard to observe if they just happen to not be streets or neighborhoods that we live in.
Right.
And so it's always incumbent upon us to ensure that we're educating the public, on that. And I suspect that that's going to be a priority of ours as we conclude fiscal year 26. I've already conveyed to staff that I want to be very transparent with the results of our 5-year effort, right? Did we reach 112 miles of streets, right? Because I think it's important for us to hold ourselves accountable, but also hold ourselves accountable to the public, around, hey, we committed 5 years ago to address 112 miles of streets. How did we fare? How did we do?
That's awesome.
How can we be better? And so this is always top of mind. Streets are very important. But to your point, streets aren't the only thing. And so we want to have diversification in the way that we go about budgeting. And I think we've done a great job of that over the last few years. In fiscal year 26 specifically, I alluded to the community center project, obviously a large quality of life investment. And so we're on track to begin construction of that renovation and expansion in the spring of 2026. And so that's an exciting initiative, right? In addition, we also have some parks projects. And so we're going to begin a more intentional effort in redesigning and revamping MLK Park.
Awesome.
In the Silver City area. That'll pair well with some other developments in the area. And so we're very excited about not only our diversification on how we spend money, whether it be facilities, whether it be parks, whether it be streets, but also trying to be more intentional with where we're investing that geographically around the community.
Yeah.
It's very, very important for me that we touch as many residents as possible and that we're not blinded by the optics of who's involved or the optics of maybe, that side of town produces more revenue because they have bigger lots, bigger houses, right? I think it's important for us to not be blinded by the optics of some of these things and ensure that we're investing in streets all around town.
Yep.
We're investing in parks all around town. We're trying to improve housing all around town. And so, this large multifamily development that will be announced soon, that'll be in Silver City, is going to be a really good example of a lot of effort that staff put into ensuring that there's a continued investment in that area of town. And
specifically in that area, I know there's been a coordinated effort between the city and a couple of nonprofits to revitalize that area. So I know that's a big priority of yours too. Real quick, I wanted to talk about the CIP, to conclude kind of the streets topic, which is North Street. That's a big deal. People tend to forget. It amazes me how many people don't know that that's in the CIP and is going to be worked on, as well as Guy Grant. I mean, those are two big roadways that are going to be addressed, and that's in the budget. So it's happening, folks.
Well, I think it's important to clarify that, what's in the budget for fiscal year 26 is some of the design work associated with those projects. And so we don't actually anticipate construction of those improvements beginning into fiscal year 27. But it's a journey. It's a process. And, I think it's important to also keep in mind that why some of these projects take a while is because they're expensive.
I was just going to ask that. Can you give us a ballpark number?
So for example, when we did the study on North Street, going from 5 Points all the way to past the community center, it was over $40 million.
Just for that section.
Whole entire stretch.
Okay.
From 5 Points downtown all the way to past the community center.
$40 million.
Over $40 million. And so these improving streets is very expensive, right? And that particular project is expensive because it's not just a street that needs to be fixed. We need to replace all the pipes that are underneath the street. We need to address drainage.
Right.
We need to address the pedestrian element of it through sidewalks, right? So that certain sections of North Street aren't wide enough. And so we're going to have to do some right-of-way acquisition.
Got it.
That takes time. That takes money. And so it's just important to keep in mind that, for us, it's not just about fixing what you see. It's about fixing what you don't see.
Yeah.
And that sometimes makes these projects very expensive. And North Street's no exception. And so just keep in mind that that's a very expensive project, which I would suspect, and so is Guy Grant, and I would suspect that that's why those projects haven't come to fruition. But I'm also excited to begin the journey of addressing those long-awaited corridors that need a lot of work.
Right.
And so with North Street, we know that council prioritized the section that runs in front of Patty Welder. And so that's important because we want to prioritize not only the worst part of North Street first, but also be mindful of where the schools are located.
Right.
During the public input process to the community center project, we also received a lot of feedback around, and rightfully so, people asking, it doesn't make sense, to invest all this money in the community center, but not fix North Street in front of the community center.
Right.
And so we actually added some money to mill and overlay the section of North Street in front of the community center shortly after the renovation. Eventually, that part's going to have to also go through a major rebuild because of the utilities underneath it. But it might be a while before we have the money to do that. And so we felt it was appropriate to, at minimum, do a mill and overlay over that section of North Street.
Yeah.
So that hopefully we can just have a better looking, smoother section of North Street while we continue to budget for these major rebuilds.
It's a constant balance between what the street, because the streets vary throughout the community. Like some might need a mill and overlay, some might need a complete reconstruct. And those things are part of the preventative maintenance program.
Or some are just a seal coat.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And so
they cost, my goodness, varying amounts of money.
Being mindful of the budget, being mindful of the impact on our taxpayers.
Right.
Because we could always just issue more debt to do more projects. There is no cap to how much debt we can issue.
Right.
But the cap or the limit comes from, the policy direction from council that we want to be mindful on the tax rate.
Yeah.
But we also need to be mindful of how realistic it is to implement these projects. And so, we're coming across an era in our engineering and CIP life that I think is exciting with some of these larger
well, it certainly sounds like it and looks like it. If you drive around and you see some of the recently completed streets like Crestwood, that was a big one.
Right.
Anyway, there's others being worked on. So that was my point in bringing that one up. So thanks for giving us the details and the timeline. That is a perfect segue because once again, in the room, folks, is Sam Hankins over here to do the word on the streets. Again, I feel like I need a hype button. But anyway, Sam, do you want to? There you go. That was good.
That was pretty good, actually.
I'm Sam
Back
Hankins
to Sam.
with the word on the street. And we talk about a lot of different kind of streets and the word on them for those of you who are more interested in that kind of thing. And specifically Northside Road, which is being reconstructed fully. And what's interesting about that is that most of that road is within the county limits. There's a little bit right by Navarro that's city owned.
Right.
And so we've entered into this agreement with the county where just the whole road is being redone and we're paying for our part and they're paying for our part. And we do have some photos of the very start of construction on that.
Photo creds by Sam Hankins.
Yes, Sam Hankins. It was a very hot day that day and I was tramping around with no sidewalk. So I hope you all like it. But it was we got these great photos, and what you're seeing going on right here is actually called point repairs, and it's where they kind of address some major problem areas of the road before they come back and do the formal reconstruction. And then the next step of that is that they're going to fully close sections of the road in this phased approach to get it, again, fully reconstructed. And they're looking at having that done by the end of the month, I believe. So
Awesome.
very exciting time.
Very
Awesome.
exciting. And I love that we went from North Street to North Side Road because those are in very, different parts of the city. I don't know if you can hear me. And then if you go to victoriatx.gov/engineering, you can actually see a map of which streets have been in the works or have been completed recently and that are in the works. And it actually shows all throughout the city. So I thought that was great.
No, that's exciting. And
Thanks, Sam.
Kudos to the county for, approaching us, trying to partner and collaborate on that project. My hope is that this collaboration on Northside Road is really the beginning of more collaboration on more street projects, because the reality is that we have other streets that we could also potentially partner on. And so if you think of the south side of our community, whether that be Ben Jordan or Bottom Street, there's quite a bit of streets that sections of them are inside city limits and sections of them are out in the county. And so I hope that we continue to have a positive working relationship with the county to address some of these infrastructure problems, because of course to the general public, they don't care about where the line begins or ends, right?
Yeah.
They care about just their experience driving through our community. And so I'm excited about that potential.
For sure. Same. And that road specifically, I actually drive just a little bit. So appreciate the update on it. Okay. So the biggest, honestly, topic that I know we've been hearing about in council discussion here of late, and we might even hear more on in the coming meetings, is behind the tax rate.
Right.
So I know you wanted to talk about that too, Jesus, but man, we've kind of laid the foundation. We've been talking about this since last year already when we launched this podcast about the need to grow Victoria and what kind of elements are behind that. But how does the tax rate play into that broader picture and that story?
Well, I think what happened this year, is a perfect opportunity to connect the dots around that message, because you're right. We've been talking for years, but more intentionally over the last year, around the need to grow our community, because with growth comes new revenue for us. And it makes perfect sense, right? More people living in our community, that's more houses being built, that's more people living here spending their dollars at Walmart, Target, et cetera. And so that increases our sales tax. And so for us, it's important to grow if we want to continue to be aggressive with, let's say, paying first responders, right? And that's very important. Those things are very connected. And so we have to start asking ourselves, what contributes to growth? I made a comment last year when I spoke at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon that there is a correlation between the success of our schools and our ability to pay our police officers and firefighters.
Yeah.
And I remember some people looking at me like, what? That doesn't make sense. But it makes perfect sense because, people are going to move to our community or not move away unless we have better schools.
100%.
And I'm not going to have more money to pay police officers and firefighters more money unless our community grows, right? And so we need to recognize that all of these things are interconnected.
Yeah.
And this year, unfortunately, we saw a decline in our property values. And that was the first time that we've seen a decline in almost 10 years. I think the last time we saw a decline of this magnitude was after Hurricane Harvey. And it's very common, after a community goes through a natural disaster, for values to take a hit. And so for us, it put us in a position where we had to literally consider increasing the tax rate, even if we just wanted to bring in the same amount of money to do just exactly what we were doing last year. Not taking inflation into account, not taking into account the fact that it just costs more money to do the same things, right? And so that's not good, because then it puts us again in a position to have to consider increasing the tax rate just to keep up with just basic things.
Yeah.
And so that's what ended up happening. We had to have a conversation with council about increasing the tax rate, in part because of our property values going down, but also in part because we wanted to implement this aggressive pay program, right? And money doesn't grow on trees. And so we needed to consider increasing the tax rate to generate the additional revenue to at least in part help fund some of these pay raises, but also just to maintain a positive momentum in our budget. And so we're hopeful that this doesn't become a habitual thing and that we can see positive increases in our values next year so that we're not in a position where we have to increase the tax rate again.
Right.
But that's unfortunately the position that we're in. And as we start off the podcast, we're not the only city that was in that position. I mean, I'm seeing news articles of cities increasing their tax rates by 10%, 20%. I mean, there are some cities that are being very, very aggressive with that because they're having to be. And so it's just a sign of the times.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, in this year in particular, I think it's a really great opportunity to try and educate the public in the correlation between property values and tax rate.
Right.
Because over the last 5 years, for example, previous to this year, we've been able to decrease or maintain the tax rate. But in each of those years, we were seeing increases in our property tax values, right? And so understanding just how that works, right, I think is critical to having a conversation around needs that we have and how we can fund them. You know, I also like to remind the public that I didn't create the rules of the game, right? The mayor didn't create the rules of the game. Council didn't create the rules of the game. You know, I recognize, and I'd be the first to tell you that this approach to collecting revenue through property taxes is not sustainable. I'd be the first to tell you, I don't like it.
Yeah, we're very dependent on it.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think that it's as we're seeing through conversations at the state level with the state trying to cap and things of that sort.
Yeah,
I think everybody's realizing that it's just not a sustainable structure.
Yeah,
but I didn't make the structure, right? And so we have a choice. You know, do we just ignore the rules of the game and ignore the structure for the sake of just expressing, I guess, being against the structure?
Yeah.
But then where does that leave us, right? It leaves us with no money to be able to do things, right? And so I think it's important that we play the game, that we do what we can, because we're not directly impacting changing the rules of the game at the state level.
Right.
And so very blessed that we have a council that understands that and that they understand that we didn't make the rules of the game and that we're sort of stuck, you know, with this formula of, well, property values go down, you have to increase the tax rate.
Right. Well, and Victoria is in a unique position too, because we are in what people like to say the crossroads. So we're constantly comparing ourselves to others around us, whether it be bigger cities like San Antonio, Houston, you know, even growing cities like New Braunfels and San Marcos, right? Yep. And I remember you talking in the beginning of the budget about how other cities are growing and have been growing at exponentially significantly more rates than Victoria has. I mean, I think we only grew like 6%. I
think it was 8% over a 20-year period.
Versus like San Marcos, 100 something percent. Isn't that crazy? Is that real? Like that can happen?
It's real. And that's why it's important for us to recognize that connection, right? Because that lack of growth has the city of Victoria with a $67 million general fund. We're competing against cities that have general funds that are over $100 million.
Yeah.
So how can we ever expect for us to pay our police officers or firefighters what they might get paid in a suburb outside of Houston?
Right.
It's just never going to happen. And so we just need to be cognizant of how all these things are connected and cognizant of how they impact the bottom line for us.
For sure.
But there's also a lot of positive that comes from that. You know, I don't want people to think that we're sort of just stuck, you know, with this. We're investing quite a bit of money in economic development. We're investing quite a bit of energy in trying to invest in initiatives that will grow Victoria, whether that be supporting, you know, the university transition, whether that be supporting the school district, whether that be, you know, improving housing throughout our community through infill initiatives, whether that be investing in quality of life amenities like the community center or the downtown plaza or the dog park or whatever it is, right? All of those things are in an attempt to ensure that we have people that want to live in Victoria, want to stay in Victoria, want to move to Victoria. And so we're actively doing that. And so as an example, in fiscal year 26, one of the things that we recognized, not only through a study, but also just through conversation, is that one of the areas of opportunity for us in the world of economic development is in supporting our small businesses.
I was just going to ask.
That are already here, right? Because they're pivotal to our growth economically. And so we've actually are reorganizing ourselves so that our economic development department can take on a more intentional role with helping. And so we are embarking on establishing a more formalized business retention and expansion program that will be spearheaded by Danielle Williams, our economic development director. And so I'm sure at some point she'll come on and kind of elaborate on her vision for that program. But I think that's an example of us investing in our growth and investing in trying to do that. some of this growth isn't going to happen by magic. And so one of the other things that we're being more intentional about in fiscal year 26 is just redeveloping underutilized property.
Yep.
We know that having property that's owned by the city, the county, the school district, and that's not being used is not actually producing any revenue for any of those entities. And so we want to take the lead as a city on redeveloping all of these properties, the ones that we have, but also the ones that some of our partner public entities have, because we have the experience and the know-how on how to do it. But I think that's a low-hanging fruit opportunity for us to just take an unproductive lot and convert it into a productive lot so that it can generate some positive revenue for the city, the county, and the school district.
Right.
And so we want to be more intentional with that. Because again, if we just leave it up to the market to kind of do that, it's not going to happen, because if it would have already happened.
Yeah.
And so again, we just have to be more intentional. I was having a conversation last week as well with one of our business leaders and talking about how, we need to look at the city as a business, and I oftentimes use the H-E-B analogy, and I want to share it again because I think it's important. When a private company like H-E-B looks at establishing a new product and putting it on the shelves in their store, they're not going to increase the square footage of that store to do it. They're going to look to see where they have empty shelves. They're going to look to see where they might be able to rearrange some things within the store, because they know that it's not cost effective to increase the square footage of the store, because that's more square feet they have to maintain, right?
Yep.
And so for us as cities, we need to think smarter like that, because if you drive around, everybody sees that there's plenty of vacant shelves throughout our community that just have nothing on them. And so we need to prioritize that over growing the square footage of the city.
Yeah.
Because growing the square footage of the city only increases the miles of streets that we have to maintain. And we all know we're already struggling to keep up with the ones we have.
Right.
So why not focus on redeveloping those empty shelves throughout our community and prioritize them? And so that's what we want to be more intentional with by taking the lead, or trying to take the lead with some of these underutilized properties. And so that'll help our cause to increase our revenues without having to increase our liability of maintenance by having to grow to the outside.
Right.
And that won't happen by magic.
Right.
We have to be intentional with managing that.
For sure. What is an example of a redeveloped lot, just for those who might be hearing this concept for the first time?
So I'll give you an example of one that we're working on ourselves. So we have a property off Pine Street that used to be a site with ground with a well, and there's a former groundwater storage tank there. Used to be home to our purchasing office. It hasn't really been utilized, right? So we want to redevelop that property, put some single family homes on it, because again, that property is not paying any property taxes right now, right? So how can we kind of do that? But it doesn't have to be something like that. It could be something as simple as the county, for example, taking over the old Advocate building and making sure that it doesn't just stay vacant.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in that scenario, that helped activate it, but the county still owns the building, so it's not necessarily paying property taxes, but it's still a benefit to have it filled, right? But there are other examples of on the private sector side that I think we can all sort of learn from, right? So, as an example, right across the new public safety headquarters building, you had an abandoned 7-Eleven.
Yep.
That's now a dentist office, right? That's an example of a redevelopment that took an unproductive lot and converted it into a productive lot.
Right.
You look at some of the properties downtown, right, that were vacant and that now have active businesses on them. Those are all examples of, redeveloping unproductive spaces into productive spaces. The old Sears building at the mall.
Yep.
Unproductive space that wasn't generating anything for anybody, wasn't generating revenue for the mall owners, wasn't generating revenue for us.
Yeah.
So we made a deal with the mall that helped redevelop that former Sears space, and now everybody wins.
Yeah.
Right? They're getting the additional revenue from that lease. We're getting additional revenue from the sales tax and the
Win-win.
property tax, right? So those are the types of things that we need to do more of in order to be successful in growing in a smart manner.
Right. And helping facilitate that incentive, really,
Right.
for growth. Love it.
Another example real quick off
Sure.
of Water Street, right? Where the new Dollar General store went in, the Dollar General market. Perfect example, right? There was nothing there. I mean, there's just an abandoned
Yeah.
space. now it's a productive lot.
Yep.
Right. That is providing a benefit to the residents in the area while also now providing revenue for us.
Yep.
Right. And so we need more examples of that. And some of them happen organically, like some of the examples that I gave you, but others aren't as obvious. And so that's where we need to be more intentional with redeveloping ourselves.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And I'm excited to learn more about that. We're going to have Danielle on here in a few weeks. I'm not really sure when, but she's got a few examples of that with some new restaurants, new properties coming on the tax rolls. So that's exciting to hear about. I'm always excited to hear from you guys about that. Well, man, we've talked about a lot about the budget. I want to ask you the biggest last lingering question, which is, what do you want people to take away from this year's budget story? It's been different. We were just talking about that, right? It's been unique this year, given the climate, the economy, all the things. But what would you want people to take away?
I think the biggest thing that matters to me is people walking away with hopefully seeing how much we're investing in our people. It's been a big priority for me for the last 6 years to just be better at that. Right. We're nothing without the over 600 employees that work for us, whether it be the ones at the surface water treatment plant or the police officers, firefighters, the folks that pick up the garbage, or even y'all. Right. I mean, we would be doing nothing if it weren't for our people. And so I think that's what I'm most proud of. And that's what I want people to walk away with, is that this $4.4 million pay program that's going into effect in October. I mean, that's very meaningful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I recognize that we have a way to go because it does heavily prioritize public safety. But our people are important. They're a priority. And so I'd like people to hopefully take away an understanding that we see that, we value them, and we're going to continue to invest in our employees regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the big thing that I care about the most, is just the investment in our folks.
Right. I mean, honestly, from my perspective, again, I'm trying to keep the bigger, broader picture at play, but also consider and put myself in the shoes of a random resident who, again, doesn't get the privilege of getting to be in rooms like this where we have conversations. Hopefully, they're listening to this podcast. But if not, my point is these people don't get the in and out, the day-to-day details, or even the city council meeting conversations that happen around the budget. And it has been evident, I can tell you if you're listening, since day one, I have been hearing conversations, whether at leadership meetings, executive team meetings, public council meetings, or now on this podcast, that you and council have been prioritizing employee pay. And speaking specifically to you, I have heard that. And so it is evident. It's very felt. And I'm just excited to be a fly on the wall, getting to hear it and then getting to see the words put into action this year. So that's what I would say. I hope everyone else sees that. I'm just going to kind of speak broadly here, but a lot of people have been having public conversations, whether online or in person, about public safety pay. And it's been really nice to be able to, me as a resident here who lives here, be able to say to my neighbor or my friend or my family member, we're doing something about it.
We are, and I'm glad.
Good job.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Really, council deserves a lot of credit too, because they've allowed me to focus on that.
Yeah.
You made a comment about certain folks talking about it, and it reminded me that I myself have seen some and have heard some comments around the benefits aspect of it. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there around the benefits aspect of it, because we haven't increased, and as a matter of fact, we've decreased on multiple occasions the employee premiums for health insurance in the last 6 years.
Nice.
And so this idea that somehow our health insurance is not affordable, it's up to interpretation, obviously, right? But we've done the best that we can to make it affordable through decreasing the employee rates.
Yeah.
And so we oftentimes hear that folks, are leaving because of the benefits aspect of it. Like I mentioned earlier, there are some cities that just have a lot of money and they can just, offer it for free, basically, for a lot of employees, right?
Yeah.
We're not in that financial position, but we are in a position where we have made some changes over the last 6 years that I would argue have put our medical offerings now in the best position they've ever been, offering the most value for as little as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just want to clear that up.
Sure.
That over the last 6 years, we've done, again, the best we can to decrease the employee premiums.
Yeah.
And so we are continuing to try and do that so that we can add greater value.
Love it.
So,
Well, thanks for that clarification. I hadn't quite heard that one yet, but valid point.
Yep.
Well, is there anything else, Jesus? I know we've talked a lot about budget, but anything else we can expect on the horizon?
I think the biggest thing that to look for, of course, is the community center project. And so we plan on providing an update to council probably by the end of the calendar year with just the latest design, site layout, of the project. We've been working behind the scenes with the architect and with key stakeholders, such as the Livestock Show board of directors, to try and really finalize and put together a product that works really well and that could really be that multi-purpose facility that we all desire to have. And so we're very excited with the progress that we've made on the design and very excited to hopefully roll that out publicly in the next couple of months. But that's a big, exciting project that's coming up.
Yeah.
I suspect that the conversation around our utility system will continue to be at the forefront, rightfully so. And so I'm excited about the opportunities to continue to educate and continue to improve upon that because it's important, as we've said, right?
Yeah.
And so overall, just excited about the pay program, the community center project, and just the continued opportunity to improve our utility system.
Right. And another facility coming online is coming up in December, right? November, December?
Yeah,
what is it now?
The public safety headquarters building will be completed by the end of November.
There you go.
And so we anticipate the move happening in December and hopefully after the holidays, everything's rocking and rolling at the new facility. That's moved along, nicely. Very, very exciting. I toured it a couple of weeks ago and it's unbelievable just how nice it is on the inside. I think our folks are very excited about it. I've been saying from day one, our community and our employees deserve a state-of-the-art facility. And I'm excited that we're able to provide that, for our public safety personnel, specifically the police department.
Right.
And so, that'll come online at the end of the calendar year.
That is awesome. Pay and a new facility. They got it going on. So that's awesome. I can't wait to go and tour it once it's done.
So if you know anybody, that's interested in being a firefighter or police officer, now is the time to come on board.
VictoriaPD.com, folks.
That's right.
Apply today.
Now is the time.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to see it all. I know one of the biggest questions, just to kind of conclude with that we always get is, well, what's going to happen to everybody else when PD moves out? City Hall will be renovated eventually. Obviously, that's got to happen, and more of the city staff members will go over there and kind of free up some more space, which is a problem. It's been a problem. So
yeah, are you sure you don't want to just have the studio be your office forever?
Right. If y'all don't know, guys, this is a nice looking studio, but it's actually my office. My desk is right there. No, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's how it's just a picture, an example of how we've had to make creative use of our space.
Yeah.
So.
No, we're excited. That's a 10, 15-year plan that we have in place for city facilities. And so I'm just excited about continuing to invest, again, in our employees and our facilities.
Right.
And I should say that we're doing this while not sacrificing continuing to invest in the things that the public sees and that are important to them. Right. And so as I mentioned earlier, we're still investing a significant amount of money in streets. And so we're able to walk and chew gum. I know I say that all the time.
Yeah.
But we're just in a good point where we're able to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's about, again, a balancing act.
Absolutely.
You're touching all the main priority points, trying to fill in a few others that will help facilitate growth here in Victoria, which will help facilitate more revenue. I keep using the word facilitate. So here's one more: to facilitate paying for more things like your streets people, like your first responders pay. Those things matter. So thank you for explaining all that. I love it when we get the opportunity to kind of tell the story from a very complex situation that's always ever changing in a dynamic, economic environment and political environment, but how that's playing out in real time. And so very excited to see, love the story of it. A good year despite the challenges we've seen. And I'm just excited to see what all you guys come up with during the next year.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yes.
So thank you.
That just leaves us with more room to talk next time about way more. So guys, don't lose sight of the bigger picture. There's so much going on in Victoria, so much new growth. Even if you look at the past few years that our mayor, our council, our city manager sitting right here, Jesus Garza, has been able to bring to fruition. Very excited to see that in our community. Anything from the Duck Pond to the De Leon Plaza expansion and renovation project, the community center, all these historic pay program that we're hearing about, streets, 50% increase since the prior 5-year period. All of it matters, folks. So make sure that you are keeping that in your mind when you think about what's going on here at the City of Victoria. So once again, Jesus, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
I always say program.
Appreciate
it's a podcast.
Thanks
for being on the podcast. And thank you all for listening. And please share this with your neighbors, your family, and your friends. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Town Talk. Check out future episodes at victoriatx.gov/Town Talk, or of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Spotify account. Make sure you hit that notification button to be sure that you get alerted instantly when our new episodes debut. You don't want to get behind, you want to stay informed, so make sure you do that. We appreciate your support. Couldn't do it without you. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you next time.